and I'm really excited to be here today. A little bit about me. So I look after, actually one, okay, yeah. A little bit about me. Can you guys see my next slide? I'm not sure. Okay, amazing. Um, I look after partnerships here at Cohere, but I've been in the tech industry for over 15 years now. It seems like a really long time. But I've kind of seen tech evolve through different kinds of phases from, early days for me, where everything was on-prem and, businesses were hosting their own servers and folks were, building in some outdated languages, to going through the whole cloud revolution, where businesses started to move to the cloud and obviously start to take advantage of new capabilities, which has led to innovation in artificial intelligence, because now you can just leverage some of those infrastructure capabilities in the cloud to actually power your applications or your solutions wherever they are. So I'm a little bit of a veteran in this space, but today I wanted to talk to you guys about kind of the opportunity with AI. And I'm sure we all see it kind of all over. If you're on social media, for instance, on Instagram, you can take a really basic picture of yourself and sort of jazz it up and make it look stunning. And that's one application of AI. Another is, if you watch Netflix or any of the streaming platforms where they're looking at your behavior and your previous sort of viewing history and trying to predict what your preferences are going to be. And then the third example I wanted to share is with Google, who's actually a huge partner to Cohere, where you start to type out your search query and it already starts to recommend options to you, again, based on what it knows about you, your location, your history. And the goal there is to give you relevant information as quickly as possible. Now, the one thing all these examples have in common is that they're all massive tech companies, right? Like for most developers, you say to yourself, well, I see that Facebook is doing that on Instagram, or, Netflix is doing it on their platform, and Google, but these are massive companies. And so how do I use these capabilities without being in one of these companies? And that's exactly what we're here to make possible at Cohere. So first, I wanted to define NLP, because we do use the term, all over in our marketing collateral, and it was on my first slide where I said, we want to teach you how to build the next generation of apps with NLP. But NLP in itself means natural language processing. It's a subfield of AI, and it's primarily concerned with processing and understanding of human language by machines. So think of it as giving a computer or a machine the ability to understand what people say, what they mean, and use that insights to give them more efficient or more useful experiences with machines or with applications, right? And there's some areas already where you start to see AI in action. I know I shared the more sort of consumer-focused use cases, but in a business context, like if any of you uses Gmail, you probably experienced a situation where you're typing out an email and it's auto-completing the sentence or trying to predict what you want to say. You see it in voice assistants when you call customer support and you're getting some AI-enabled bot as your first point of contact, chat bots as well, and then also with basic translations where you can get a text from in any language and then get it translated to another language, just by calling on an API essentially. Now, I'm sure from those who are not very familiar with NLP, the question usually comes up and like, why does this matter? Like, why should I care about this? So machines can understand language. What's the big deal? The big deal is that today, 80% of the world's data is unstructured, and it's captured in text in some database or some data store. And we don't have a great way to actually get insights from unstructured data, because you can think of this as your emails or your call transcripts or chat transcripts, all the communication you've ever made in your entire life. That's, a lot of that's probably sitting as unstructured data in different data stores. And today there's just not much insights or value being derived out of that. When you think about organizations, they even have more data. They have transactional data with each customer. They have reviews, feedback. They have product descriptions and service descriptions. They have all kinds of data that's not structured, that getting insights from would be super beneficial. And so if 80% of the world's data is unstructured and we're not really able to leverage that data today, that means everything we see around us is actually built off of 20% of the data. And I mean, those numbers really excite me, because I'm like, if everything I experience today is just 20%, what is possible if we unlock the rest of it, right? And so that's why NLP is a big deal, because it gives us a way to make sense of that data that we've not been able to leverage in the past. Now, switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about Cohere and, about how you would typically work with building NLP into a product, and then how we would make that much easier and much more accessible for developers. So today, if you work in an organization, and you have to be in an organization because as a developer or a student or someone who's just starting out, you're not going to have access to these resources. And most organizations, to be honest, don't have access to it, because it's really expensive to invest in building out the infrastructure and the team, and then kind of the modeling process as well. But typically what an organization would need to do is, in order to I'm gonna use an example application here. So let's say you're trying to build an application that sends a custom Thanksgiving message to every single customer. You don't want something generic. You want it to be personalized. You want it to be based on, something they've told you about themselves. And so maybe you have a field in a form and that would be, say, step one, where there's a form field where people tell you about themselves. And this is where the data comes in. And then you have step two, where you basically want to use that to customize, generate a Thanksgiving message. And so you take that form and you put it in a data store, but then you now want to send out that information to be sort of processed and get a custom generation per customer. Like if you wanted to do that today in step three, first, you're going to need to collect a ton of data about, Thanksgiving messages, right? And customer descriptions of themselves. And then you're going to need to somehow label that data and say, well, for customers who describe themselves as this would be an amazing Thanksgiving message for that person. And then step two is you're going to need software to train your models. You're going to need inferencing software. You're going to need a way to evaluate the model that you're building, because you have to build a custom model. And then you're going to start to think about compute, storage. You're going to need a full-time team of machine learning engineers and probably ops engineers and just everyone who's going to keep this model running and updated. You're going to think about safety and trust. You don't want your model to kind of write out stuff that offends people. You think about maintenance. If you want to keep your application up to date, you're going to keep innovating and trying to make better Thanksgiving messages than your competitors. And then, I already talked about the data labeling. And so these are all the tasks that you're going to have to figure out, because you just want to wish people a custom, you want to send people a custom Thanksgiving message. And it just seems like too much effort, right? And so you don't see this happening very often, because for many applications, it's just not worth the investment to go build out all of this. Now, switching gears, I'm just showing what it would take to build the same application with Cohere. So think of it as us having built out everything in this sort of bottom section here, like from data collection to labeling to training to maintenance, R&D, like we've done that. So that you just, build your form, capture the information, store it in your database or warehouse, and then write an API call to Cohere with that information, and receive a custom message for each customer. Like all you need to do is call on an API. And so you can get this built and get this started like way faster. And so for individuals or for small or mid-sized companies that cannot make this investment by themselves, or where it doesn't even make sense to do that, this makes it possible for you to actually start to leverage NLP within your own applications. I would argue that even for large enterprises, like where, again, they might have the resources, but if it's not your core business to build and manage models, just the way you host your data in the cloud, or you host some applications in the cloud because it makes sense to do that, it might also just make financial sense or like business sense to use a large language model like Cohere's offering. And then I just want to give an example of, a lot of our customers or our users are building products that actually use our models in more than one task. And that's really easy to do. Again, you might have wanted to generate a custom Thanksgiving message. And that's, pretty much a generic task. Like generating a Thanksgiving message doesn't seem highly specialized. And so you can just send that to our baseline models. Now, let's say further along the line, you decided, well, I don't want to just do this for Thanksgiving. I want to build out a whole thing that generates, every time there's a holiday, I want a new message sent out. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my company and my brand. And I wanted to sound like my company because we have a really good marketing positioning. Well, if you wanted to do that later on, again, it would still be an API call, but this time you will be first looking to create your own custom models, which again, super easy to do with Cohere. And so you would bring some of that data about your company or about your, the entities that you want recognized. Give us a few examples of what that brand voice sounds like. And then we can train a custom model so that when you want to call on that, for your future tasks, you just call on that specific model, and whatever data you share or you use for that training is kind of only accessible within your domain. So like within your business or your teammates, if you give them permissions to do that, we don't share that with other customers. So you're not sort of contributing to a pool that you don't have control over. It's fully within your control who gets access to your data. All right. So I wanted to give a few examples, seeing as this is a hackathon and it's competitive, and I wish everyone would win, but we can't all be winners every single day. I wanted to give you guys a few tips just in terms of how to think about building, whatever ideas you have or you're working on. So this is an example of a flow of, this is actually something that a few of my colleagues built during our internal hackathon week, where we wanted to try to create a factual and contextual Q&A. We called it Ask Jeeves 2.0. For those of you who know what Ask Jeeves is, it's a search engine from, I think, the early 2000s, where you could type a question to Jeeves, who's this virtual butler type personality, and just say to Jeeves, like, who was the Queen of England in 1800, right? And Jeeves would go search that and respond with just the name. And so we were trying to replicate that with Cohere. And so what we did was Well, step one is that you take in the question. So this would be, who was the Queen of England in 1800? And then we decided to do two things. First, on the I'll take you to the top flow and then I'll come back to the bottom, what's happening there. But first, we sent it to our generate endpoint, which generates text. And we wanted it to convert whatever a user entered into a contextualized question. So sometimes users are not direct in terms of how they ask questions. Sometimes they would say, in 1800, there was a Queen of England. Who do you think she was? Like, that's a question. And it would be exactly the same as who was the Queen of England in 1800. For those of us who use search engines, you know that the sort of more wordy option will probably not get you the best results. Like, the more sort of surgical you are around typing in your search query, the better results you get. And so what we're doing here is telling our generate endpoint, like, whatever a user sends in, no matter how like verbose or like ambiguous it is from like a meaning perspective, try to convert that into a question that's like simple to send to a search engine. So that's what's happening here. You get a contextualized question. And then we take that contextualized question and send it to the search API. So this could be any search API. And then it generates, a bunch of web results. So again, think about if you're searching on Google, you get a bunch of links. But then we actually go into those links and grab the top 3 pages from the results that were shared. And then we kind of queue those here for a similarity comparison. Again, this is another call to a Cohere model, which is doing similarity comparison. Now, I'll pause here to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on in the bottom flow. So while all of that was happening, we also sent another call to generate. And this time, we were trying to create a template for an answer. So think about, if you were having a conversation that sounded natural and you asked the person, hey, who was the Queen of England in 1800? They would respond with something like Queen Victoria. I'm not sure if that's factually accurate, but let's just go with it. So they would say, oh, Queen Victoria was the queen in 1800, right? And that's what the answer should sound like. And so we're using this other call to figure out what should the answer sound like. And once we have that, we compare that answer to what we grabbed from the web pages. Now, the thing about the generate model is that it's really great at generating language that sounds correct, but it's not really factual, right? So sometimes it's lucky and it guesses right, but a lot of the time it's just guessing, right? So it's not accurate. And so that's the whole point of this example, which is to create something that was factual and also sounded natural. And so we take that natural sounding answer and we compare it with the 3 facts that we grabbed, and that's what's happening in this similarity stage. We pull out the most relevant answers or paragraphs that have the right answer, and that would be paragraphs that are most similar to what was generated here. And then we make one last call to our generate model. And what we're saying here is, what we were doing here was saying, well, respond to the user in this tone of voice. And so this could be, respond to the user as a pirate or respond to the user as a clown or whatever. You can use any examples and just give it some examples of what personality you want. And then it would give you the final answer in that personality. And it will be a factual and accurate response to the question that was asked in the tone of voice that you want it to be. So this is a bit of a complex example, but I wanted to share it because I wanted to share the thinking around how do you build out that flow if you're trying to figure out, well, you have an idea for a hackathon project and this is your first time working with our models or LLMs, you might want to kind of plot this out and figure out, well, what's going to happen at each stage, how many calls are you going to need to make, and then does it make sense before you actually go out and start building. I have a couple more examples, and I think I might be almost at time, so I'll try to go through these quickly. This one is a Magic the Gathering card generator, again, developed by Nick, who's one of our co-founders at Cohere. It's a really simple one because it just has 2 steps, right? So for those of you that are Magic fans, unfortunately, never played it, but I've heard great things. This is a generator that basically takes in a description of a card and then generates, well, it takes in a character name and then generates a description and then takes that description and generates an image. Now, this image generation is a call to another API, not Cohere's at this point, although we're kind of playing around in this space these days. But yeah, you can send it to any text to image API and then get an image that describes that kind of is a visualization of the description. And so the output here is you have a card that's, winged egg. That was the input. You have an image of an egg with wings that looks super spooky, and I think that's the whole point with Magic. And then you also have like a description. It's a little too small to read, but it's in like this sort of strange mythical language that Magic the Gathering uses for their cards. So this is a super simple one. For those of you who are thinking about Thanksgiving cards, I might have just given you the sort of cheat sheet for that. And then the last one is a recommendation system. Again, a bit more complex, but what's happening here is it takes inputs of what you're currently reading. It tries to understand, like, what are the themes within that. So it's doing a similarity sort of scoring within your history, and it's coming up with like categories that you are interested in, and then it's taking that information and like searching for other similar articles that have the same kind of semantic meaning or that are semantically similar. It classifies them, determines if they're in the same category, extracts the names of those articles, and then it recommends them to you. So again, cheat sheet if you're looking to build a recommendation system. And that was my very last slide. I just wanted to say good luck with the hackathon. I think it's going to be super fun. Can't wait to see what you build. Anyone wants to reach out to me for any reasons, if you're like a business user or you're from a company that's interested in learning more, feel free to send me an email. If you're just a dev and you just want to connect, I'm always happy to chat with people. And you can get all the information you need about our models on our website. If you haven't already been there, it's cohere.ai or cohere.com. And good luck.